I'm Ashley Reynolds, 39 years old, and today I received legal papers while sitting at my executive desk. My hands trembled as I read the document. My estranged parents, who threw me onto the street at 17 when I told them I was pregnant, were suing me for financial support in their old age. The parents who threw me away like garbage when I needed them most were now demanding I take care of them. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Junior year of high school should have been about SAT prep and planning college visits. I maintained a solid 3.8 gigapascals, participated in debate club, and dreamed of becoming the first in my family to attend an Ivy League school. My parents, Barbara and Richard Reynolds, had built their entire identity around being good parents to their perfect daughter. We lived in a comfortable 4-bedroom house in a respectable suburb, attended church every Sunday, and projected the image of the ideal American family. Tyler Matthews had been my boyfriend since freshman year. He was the quarterback of our football team, handsome, popular, but also surprisingly kind. We'd been careful, or so we thought. When I missed my period in October, I chalked it up to stress from AP exams. When I missed a second one in November, panic set in. "I need you to buy me a pregnancy test," I whispered to my best friend Melissa during lunch period. That night, locked in Melissa's bathroom, I watched in horror as 2 pink lines appeared on the stick. I called Tyler immediately. "I'm coming over," he said, his voice shaking. An hour later, we sat in his car outside a closed shopping center. "What are we going to do?" he asked, his eyes red-rimmed. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but we'll figure it out together, right?" He squeezed my hand. "Of course. We just need some time to think." We decided not to tell anyone for a week while we researched our options. We were so naive, thinking we could handle this massive life change by ourselves. We discussed impossible scenarios: getting married after graduation, living with his aunt in another state, even running away together. But reality has a way of shattering teenage fantasies. My secret lasted exactly 4 more days. I'd been successfully hiding my morning sickness by saying I needed to shower first thing, using the running water to mask the sounds of retching. But one Saturday morning, the nausea hit during breakfast. I barely made it to the downstairs bathroom. "Ashley, are you sick?" my mother's voice called through the door. "Just something I ate," I managed to say between heaves. When I emerged pale and sweaty, my mother's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She was a labor and delivery nurse. She knew the signs. "This is the 3rd morning you've been sick," she said, arms crossed. "And you've been tired, emotional. Is there something you need to tell me?" I tried to brush past her. "It's just a stomach bug." She grabbed my arm. "Ashley Marie Reynolds, look me in the eye and tell me you're not pregnant." I couldn't. My eyes filled with tears, and that was confirmation enough. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Richard!" she screamed. "Richard, come here now." What followed was the worst 2 hours of my life. My father's face turned purple as my mother explained her suspicions. When I finally whispered, "Yes, I'm pregnant," he slammed his fist on the kitchen table so hard that his coffee mug toppled over, dark liquid seeping into the white tablecloth. "How could you do this to us?" my mother wailed, as if my pregnancy was a personal attack on her reputation. "After everything we've given you," my father growled. "You throw it all away for some boy. You're nothing but trash now." "Dad, please," I started. "Don't call me that," he snapped. "No daughter of mine would end up a teenage whore." His words cut through me like a knife. My mother didn't defend me. She just sobbed dramatically about what the neighbors would think, what our pastor would say, how I'd ruined all their plans for me. "There are options," my mother finally said, composing herself. "We can take care of this quietly. No one needs to know." I understood immediately what she meant. "I'm not getting an abortion," I said firmly. This unleashed a new torrent of rage from my father. "Then you're not living under my roof," he spat. "I won't have my home turned into a nursery for your mistake." Richard, my mother gasped, though I couldn't tell if she was shocked or agreeing. She has until tomorrow, he continued, as if I wasn't in the room. She either fixes this problem, or she leaves. That night, I packed my belongings into 2 suitcases and a backpack, sobbing silently into my pillow. Neither parent came to check on me. The next morning, my father loaded my bags into the car without a word. The 20-minute drive to Tyler's house was silent, except for my occasional sniffles. He pulled up to the curb and put the car in park. "I've called Tyler's parents. They're expecting you." Those were the last words my father said to me, as he unloaded my bags onto the sidewalk and drove away without looking back. Standing on the Matthews' front porch with my life packed into 3 bags, I felt smaller than I ever had before. Tyler opened the door before I could knock his face a mask of anxiety. "They're in the living room," he whispered, helping me with my largest suitcase. Tyler's parents, Diana and Gregory Matthews, sat stiffly on their matching beige recliners. Diana's pinched expression made it clear I wasn't welcome. Gregory at least attempted a strained smile. "Ashley," Diana began, her voice clipped. "We understand you're in a difficult situation. Tyler has explained everything." I glanced at Tyler, who stared at the floor, his cheeks flushed with shame. "We're willing to let you stay temporarily," Gregory added. "Just until you and Tyler can figure out a more permanent arrangement." "Thank you," I managed to say, though their charity felt more like a burden than a blessing. They set me up in their guest room, making it clear it was provisional. That first night I curled around my still flat stomach and cried until exhaustion pulled me into merciful sleep. Living with the Matthews was a special kind of torture. Diana's thinly veiled contempt revealed itself in 1,000 small ways. Separate meals, laundry done separately, constant reminders of the sacrifices they were making. Tyler grew increasingly distant, often staying late at football practice to avoid coming home. After a week, I overheard a conversation that shattered any remaining hope. "This can't continue," Diana's voice carried through the heating vent into my room. "Your future is at stake. Stanford won't look kindly on a teenage father." "What am I supposed to do, Mom?" Tyler's voice cracked. "You know what needs to happen," Gregory interjected. "You're too young for this responsibility." "She refuses to get an abortion," Tyler said. "Then she needs to consider adoption," Diana replied firmly. "And perhaps different living arrangements." 2 days later, Tyler cornered me in the backyard. "Ashley, I can't do this," he said, refusing to meet my eyes. "I'm 17. I'm not ready to be a father." "I'm 17 too," I shot back. "You think I'm ready, but we're in this together." He shook his head. "I'm sorry. I just can't." Within a week I was packing again. Diana had regretfully informed me that their hospitality had reached its limit. Tyler barely looked at me as his father drove me to Melissa's house. I frantically called every friend I had, but the response was always the same sympathetic voices, explaining why I couldn't possibly stay with them. Parents didn't want a pregnant teen under their roof, as if my condition might be contagious. Only Melissa stood by me. "You can stay in our basement," she offered. My parents said 2 weeks max, but it's something. My calls to my own parents went straight to voicemail. After the 10th attempt, I drove past my house only to discover they'd changed the locks. A box with the rest of my belongings sat on the porch, photos, yearbooks, childhood mementos deemed unworthy of storage in their pristine home. Continuing school became impossible. Whispers followed me through the halls, and morning sickness made attending early classes a nightmare. After a counselor suggested alternative education options, I officially dropped out, promising myself I'd get my GED eventually. The final blow came when my cousin Heather called. "Ashley, what's going on? Uncle Richard told everyone you ran away with some boy. Aunt Barbara is devastated." The realization that my parents had crafted a narrative painting themselves as victims left me breathless with rage. I hung up without explaining, unable to defend myself against such calculated cruelty. 2 weeks at Melissa's stretched to 3, but her parents' patience wore thin. I caught her mother whispering about bad influences and Melissa's future. I packed my bags before they could ask me to leave. preserving the last shred of dignity I possessed. At 17, 5 months pregnant, I found myself truly alone. The family I thought would love me unconditionally had discarded me. The boy who promised to stand by me had retreated to the safety of his college prospects, and society had branded me a cautionary tale, the good girl who threw her life away for one mistake. With $843 saved from my part-time job at the mall, I rented a room in a rundown boarding house on the edge of town. Mrs. Geller, the elderly landlady, didn't ask questions when I paid 2 months' rent in advance. My room had a single bed, a dresser with a missing drawer, and a window that leaked cold air through cracked ceiling. The bathroom was shared with 3 other tenants, and the kitchen consisted of a hot plate and mini fridge. "It's not much," Mrs. Geller admitted, handing me a set of mismatched keys, "but it's clean and safe." Safety and cleanliness were luxuries I couldn't take for granted anymore. I spent that first night staring at the water stains on the ceiling, one hand on my growing belly, whispering promises I had no idea how to keep. Finding work while visibly pregnant proved nearly impossible. I was turned away from 13 places before Doreen's Diner gave me a chance. Doreen herself had been a teenage mother and recognized the desperation in my eyes. "You can waitress until you can't fit between the tables," she said matter-of-factly. "Then we'll move you to the register." The diner became my lifeline. 6 days a week I served greasy breakfasts to truckers and late-night pie to insomniacs. My feet swelled in the cheap sneakers I wore and my back ached constantly. Some customers were kind, tipping generously when they noticed my condition. Others made crude comments or left religious pamphlets instead of gratuity. Rebecca Taylor, a 40-something waitress with leather-tough skin and a smoker's rasp, took me under her wing. She'd raised 3 kids on her own after her husband died in a construction accident. "You've got the look," she told me during a rare quiet moment. "That deer-in-headlights world on your shoulders look." I had it too once. Rebecca helped me apply for WIC and pointed me toward a clinic that offered prenatal care on a sliding scale. She brought me hand-me-down maternity clothes and taught me how to stretch my meager paycheck until it screamed. "First rule of survival," she'd say, counting out my tips, necessities before niceties. "Rent, food, doctor. Everything else is gravy." At my 6-month checkup, the doctor frowned at my blood pressure and the protein in my urine. "You're anemic and showing early signs of preeclampsia," he said. "You need more rest, better nutrition, and less stress." I laughed until I realized he wasn't joking. Rest and less stress seemed as attainable as a mansion on the hill. When he asked about my support system, I couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm handling it," I said. He prescribed iron supplements I could barely afford and reduced working hours I couldn't possibly take. I compromised by sneaking in protein shakes during breaks and putting my swollen feet up whenever I could. One particularly difficult day, I ran into Miss Patterson, my former guidance counselor at the pharmacy. Instead of the pity or judgment I'd grown accustomed to, she offered practical help. "The Adult Education Center has GED prep classes in the evenings," she said, writing down the information. "It's never too late to continue your education, Ashley." I enrolled the next day. 3 evenings a week after 8-hour diner shifts, I dragged myself to a fluorescent-lit classroom and forced my exhausted brain to absorb algebra and American history. I often dozed off during lessons, waking with a start and wiping drool from my textbook. "Education is the one thing nobody can take from you," Miss Patterson reminded me when I considered quitting. I studied during breaks at work on the city bus and late into the night when insomnia and the baby's kicking kept me awake. 2 months before my due date, I took the GED exam, my swollen fingers barely able to grip the pencil properly. When Miss Patterson called with news that I'd passed, I sobbed so hard I alarmed Mrs. Geller. Rebecca organized a small baby shower in Doreen's Diner after closing one night. The staff pooled their resources to give me a stroller, a car seat, and a mountain of diapers. Doreen herself knitted a yellow blanket. "Yellow works for boy or girl," she explained. Practical. Practicality had become my religion. I'd long since stopped reaching out to my parents, but as my due date approached, a moment of weakness, or perhaps hope, led me to write them a letter. I told them about the GED, my job, the small but growing collection of baby supplies. I explained that I was trying to build a life for their grandchild, that I was sorry for disappointing them but not sorry for choosing my baby. I asked if they might reconsider their position now that the initial shock had passed. 2 weeks later, the unopened envelope returned to my boarding house, marked "Return to Sender" in my father's bold handwriting. Rebecca found me on the floor of my room that night, clutching the rejected letter. "Some people don't deserve to be parents," she said, helping me to my feet. "And some people become parents whether they deserve it or not. You're going to be the second kind that turns into the first kind." I clung to her words like a lifeline, as the last thread connecting me to my old life unraveled completely. The day Emma entered the world began like any other. I served the breakfast rush at Doreen's, ignoring the Braxton Hicks contractions I'd been experiencing for weeks. By lunch, the discomfort had intensified, but I convinced myself it was false labor again. During the afternoon lull, while restocking napkin dispensers, a sharp pain doubled me over, followed by a rush of fluid down my legs. "Holy shit!" Rebecca exclaimed, dropping her coffee pot. "Your water broke." Doreen appeared from the kitchen, already untying her apron. "Rebecca, get my car. Ashley, don't you dare push yet." The 20-minute drive to the hospital passed in a blur of increasing pain and panic. Rebecca held my hand in the back seat, while Doreen cursed at every red light. "I'm scared," I admitted between contractions. "Every mother since the beginning of time has been scared," Rebecca assured me. "And most of us muddle through just fine." The labor and delivery unit was a flurry of activity. A nurse took one look at my face and bypassed the registration desk, wheeling me straight into a room. The next 20 hours became a marathon of pain, exhaustion, and determination. My blood pressure spiked dangerously, prompting discussion of an emergency C-section. The baby's heart rate occasionally dipped, causing nurses to rush in and shift my position. Through it all, Rebecca remained wiping my forehead with cool cloths and advocating fiercely when a dismissive resident suggested my pain wasn't that bad yet. "I used to think nothing could hurt more than being abandoned by everyone I loved," I gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. "I was wrong. This pain brings something beautiful," Rebecca reminded me. "The other kind just leaves scars." In the waiting room, no anxious grandparents paced the floor. No father to be distributed cigars. Just Doreen, who'd returned after her shift, dozing in an uncomfortable chair. At 4:17 a.m., after one final primal push, Emma Catherine Reynolds entered the world with a furious cry that seemed to say, "I'm here, acknowledge me." 7 pounds 3 ounces of pink perfect determination. When the nurse placed her on my chest, time stopped. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, and her eyes, though unfocused, seemed to look directly into my soul. "Hello," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your mom. It's just us, but I promise that will be enough." In that moment, every sacrifice, every humiliation, every painful step of the journey became worth it. I understood with perfect clarity that I would move heaven and earth for this child, that I would become the parent I needed but never had. 3 days later, Rebecca drove us to my boarding house. The reality of single motherhood hit hard that first night alone. Emma refused to latch properly for feeding, then screamed inconsolably for hours. The room that had seemed small before now felt claustrophobic, with a bassinet wedged beside the bed. Every time I finally drifted to sleep, Emma would wake needing something. By dawn, I sat on the floor, sobbing alongside my wailing daughter, both of us exhausted and frustrated. "I can't do this," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm not enough." A knock at the door revealed Rebecca bearing coffee and donuts. "Thought you might need reinforcements," she said, taking Emma from my trembling arms. "First rule of motherhood: accept help when it's offered." She showed me a different feeding position, demonstrated the tight swaddling technique that finally calmed Emma, and watched over the baby while I showered for the first time in days. "It gets easier," she promised. Not soon, but eventually. Returning to work 6 weeks after giving birth felt like abandoning my heart outside my body. The daycare center was clean but understaffed, with one worker handling 4 infants. Each day I kissed Emma goodbye, with a mixture of guilt and necessity. Half my paycheck went to childcare, leaving barely enough for rent and essentials. Miss Patterson connected me with a young mothers program that provided parenting classes and a support group. Sitting in a circle with other girls in similar situations offered a strange comfort, the realization that I wasn't alone in my struggle. Marissa, a 19-year-old with twin boys, became a close friend and occasional babysitter. Her mother sometimes watched all 3 babies so Marissa and I could grocery shop in blessed silence, treating ourselves to dollar store face masks and pretending we were at a spa. When Emma turned 3 months old, I printed photos to send to my parents. No accusatory letter accompanied them, just pictures of their granddaughter with her birth statistics and my phone number written on the back. 2 weeks later, the envelope returned unopened like the first. This time, instead of devastation, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. Carefully, I removed the photos and placed them in Emma's baby book. On the blank family tree page, I drew a small circle with Emma's name connected only to mine. "Some people don't deserve to know you," I told my daughter, as she cooed in her second-hand bouncer. "Their loss, not ours." That night I made a promise to myself and to Emma. We would move forward, never back. We would build our family from love and choice, not blood and obligation. And someday Emma would understand that being wanted is more important than being related. Number. Part 6. Building a Future. "Mommy, look, I drew our family." 3-year-old Emma proudly held up a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures, one tall with yellow hair, one small with matching yellow scribbles. A lopsided house surrounded them, with a sun smiling down from the corner of the page. "It's beautiful, sweetie," I said, pinning it to our refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the letter E. Our small apartment was a far cry from Mrs. Geller's boarding house. With its 1-bedroom tiny kitchen and patch of grass outside that barely qualified as a yard, it wasn't much, but it was ours. I'd left Doreen's diner for a position at Office Supply Plus, where the hours aligned better with daycare, and the employee discount helped with Emma's preschool supplies. The transition hadn't been easy. Emma had developed chronic ear infections her second winter, resulting in 2 emergency room visits and surgery to place tubes in her ears. The medical bills arrived in envelopes marked final notice before I'd even received the first statement. I'd set up payment plans, $10 a month for bills that would take years to clear, and cut every possible corner to make ends meet. Dinner often consisted of creative variations on beans and rice. Emma's clothes came from thrift stores or church donation boxes. I'd become an expert at stretching resources, turning a single chicken into 4 meals, and repairing the same pair of work shoes 3 times before admitting defeat. The community college across town offered night classes with subsidized childcare. 2 evenings a week, I sat in business administration courses while Emma colored in the campus childcare center. My textbooks were outdated editions purchased online for a fraction of the bookstore price. I studied during lunch breaks after Emma's bedtime, and in waiting rooms during her doctor appointments. Brian Anderson first walked into Office Supply Plus on a Tuesday in April looking for specialty paper for his architectural firm. He returned on Thursday for ink cartridges, and again the following Monday for a presentation binder. By his 4th visit in 2 weeks, his excuses for needing office supplies had grown increasingly transparent. "I don't think a single person needs this many sticky notes," I teased as I rang up his purchase. His ears reddened. "I lose them a lot." "All 500. "I'm very forgetful," he replied with a grin. When he finally asked me to coffee, I immediately declined. "I have a daughter," I blurted out, prepared for the usual hasty retreat. Instead, his expression softened. "I know. You have her picture at your register. She looks like you." "She's my priority," I warned. I don't have time for casual dating. How about serious coffee then, he countered. Our first date lasted 20 minutes in the cafe next to my store during my break. Our second after 2 weeks of deliberation was lunch while Emma napped at her sitter's. I watched Brian carefully for signs of impatience with my constant schedule constraints and limited availability. Instead of frustration, he showed ingenuity. He brought takeout to my apartment after Emma's bedtime. He scheduled dates that included child-friendly activities. He carried picture books in his car and learned to tie tiny shoes with uncomplaining fingers. Why are you being so nice to us? I asked one evening, 6 months into our relationship, after he'd spent his Saturday assembling a bookshelf for Emma's growing library. Because you both deserve nice, he said simply. And because I'm falling in love with you. The package deal is a bonus. Trust came slowly, built in small moments. When Emma spiked a fever and I had to cancel plans last minute, he showed up with children's Tylenol and popsicles. When my car broke down, he drove us to and from daycare for a week while it was repaired. When I received my associate's degree, he framed the diploma and hung it prominently in my apartment. You should apply for the marketing coordinator position at Buildright Construction, he suggested one night, showing me a job listing. They're clients of my firm. The pay is better and they offer benefits. I don't have a marketing background, I protested. You have business training, customer service experience, and you're the most organized person I know, he countered. The rest you can learn. The interview terrified me. I wore my only good outfit, a navy pencil skirt and white blouse purchased specifically for graduation, and carried a portfolio of class projects and work commendations. Against all expectations, they offered me the job. My first paycheck with health insurance benefits reduced me to tears in the parking lot. Emma and I celebrated with store-bought cupcakes, a luxury previously reserved for birthdays. 2 years into our relationship, Brian proposed during a picnic at the city park. While Emma fed ducks by the pond, he knelt on the checkered blanket and held out a simple solitaire ring. I want to build a family with you, he said. I already love Emma like she's my own. I want to be there for dance recitals and science projects and everything in between. Say you'll let me. The wedding was small, a courthouse ceremony, followed by a reception at Doreen's diner. Rebecca, now a manager, closed the restaurant early and transformed it with white streamers and twinkling lights. Miss Patterson brought a 3-tiered cake. Emma served as flower girl, ring bearer, and enthusiastic dancer all in one. I'd sent invitations to my parents more out of obligation than hope. They went unanswered. Brian's parents had died years earlier, his father from cancer, his mother from a stroke shortly after. Our wedding party consisted entirely of chosen family friends who had supported us through the difficult years. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the justice of the peace announced to our small gathering. And I pronounce you, he smiled at Brian and Emma, officially a family. That night, after Emma fell asleep in the hotel rollaway bed, I whispered my deepest fear to Brian. What if I'm like them? What if there's something broken in me that I don't know about yet? Brian took my face in his hands. You are nothing like them. Every day you choose Emma. Every day you choose love over pride, responsibility over abandonment. That choice defines you, not your DNA. In his eyes, I saw not the scared teenage girl I'd been, but the strong woman I'd become. For the first time since that terrible day my father drove away without looking back, I felt truly, completely safe. Mom, Dad, come look at my project. 12-year-old Emma called from the dining room table, surrounded by poster board markers and printouts. Her science fair project on renewable energy featured a working solar-powered fan that Brian had helped her construct. This is impressive, I said, examining her neat handwriting and colorful graphs. You've really done your research. Dad helped with the wiring, she admitted. But I did all the writing and research myself. Brian had legally adopted Emma when she was 6, though she'd been calling him Dad since she was 4. The adoption day remains one of my happiest memories. Emma in a frilly dress, Brian in a suit, the 3 of us posing for photos outside the courthouse. The certificate hung framed in our hallway, alongside family photos and Emma's school achievement. Our suburban home wasn't extravagant, but with 3 bedrooms, a backyard swing set, and a kitchen island where we gathered for family meals, it represented everything I'd fought to provide. My position as marketing director at Buildright Construction afforded us a comfortable lifestyle, music lessons for Emma, occasional family vacations, and the security of a savings account. Emma's questions about her biological grandparents began innocuously enough. "Do I look like your mom?" she asked one evening while I braided her hair. The question caught me off guard. "You have my mother's nose," I admitted, touching the slight upturn at the end of her nose. "And my father's eyes, I think. Will I ever meet them?" I'd prepared for this question, rehearsed my answer 1,000 times. Still my voice wavered. "They made some choices a long time ago that hurt me very deeply. They aren't part of our lives." "Because of me?" Her voice was small. "No," I said, firmly, turning her to face me. "Never because of you. Because of choices they made about the kind of people they wanted to be. Those choices had nothing to do with you." She nodded, but I could see the questions multiplying behind her eyes. That night, I showed her my memory box, report cards, debate team medals, the few photos I'd salvaged before being kicked out. I answered her questions honestly, but age-appropriately, emphasizing that while biology connects people, love and commitment create true family. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in April, nearly 13 years after I'd last spoken to my mother. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable, the looping curves of her signature style now shakier with age. "I need to see you," she wrote. "I've left your father. I've done a lot of thinking over the years. I want to meet my granddaughter." For 3 days, the letter burned a hole in my desk drawer. Brian found me rereading it late one night. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his hand steady on my shoulder. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to throw it away. Another part wonders if people can change." My therapist, whom I'd started seeing after Emma's questions triggered nightmares about my own abandonment, advised caution. "Consider what you hope to gain from reconnecting," she suggested, "and what boundaries you need to protect yourself and Emma." After weeks of deliberation, I agreed to meet my mother at a cafe halfway between our homes. Brian offered to come, but this was something I needed to do alone. Barbara Reynolds had aged considerably. Her once auburn hair had turned steel gray and deep lines framed her mouth and eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and clutched her purse like a life preserver. "Ashley," she said, her voice breaking, "you look wonderful." I'd deliberately dressed for success, a tailored blazer, sleek hairstyle, wedding ring prominently displayed. Armor against whatever judgment she might still harbor. "Thank you for meeting me," she continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Why now?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. "It's been 13 years, she sighed deeply. "I made terrible mistakes. I let your father's anger dictate my actions. After he retired, things got worse. His bitterness consumed him, consumed us. I finally gathered the courage to leave. That doesn't explain why you're contacting me now. I've been seeing a counselor," she explained, "working through my regrets. You and Emma are at the top of that list." For 2 hours we engaged in careful conversation. She asked about Emma, her interests, her personality, her school performance. She inquired about my career and marriage. She offered apologies that sounded rehearsed but sincere. I revealed selected details: Emma's musical talent, my recent promotion, our summer vacation plans. I showed her a few photos on my phone but declined to give her our address or Emma's school information. "I'd like to be part of your lives," she said as we prepared to leave. "In whatever way you'll allow." "I need time," I replied honestly. "This isn't just about me anymore. Emma's well-being comes first." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. I hope I'll hear from you." 2 weeks later, Melissa called. We'd maintained loose contact over the years through social media and occasional coffee dates when she visited town. "Ashley, I ran into your mom at the grocery store yesterday." "In Hartford?" I asked, confused. "My mother lived 3 towns away." "No, here. She was with your dad." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. They're divorced." she told me. They looked very much together, Melissa continued. When I mentioned seeing you recently, your father changed the subject immediately. Further investigation revealed the truth. My father's construction supply business had failed 3 years earlier. Their retirement accounts had been depleted by poor investments. According to mutual acquaintances, they had been selling assets to cover mounting debts. They're broke, I told Brian that night. The reconciliation attempt was reconnaissance. Emma noticed my distraction. Is something wrong, Mom? Just some complications with old friends, I answered, unwilling to burden her. That night I wrote a brief email to my mother. I know you're still with Dad. I know about the financial problems. Please don't contact me again. Her response came quickly. You don't understand. We need help. Family helps family. I laughed bitterly at the irony, then blocked her email address. The memory box with my childhood mementos went into the attic, and I scheduled extra sessions with my therapist. Emma, perceptive as always, cornered me after dinner. Those people you were talking about, were they my other grandparents? I considered lying, then remembered my promise of honesty. Yes, they wanted to meet you, but I don't think that's a good idea right now. Her face fell. Because they didn't want me when I was a baby. Because they haven't shown they can be trusted with something as precious as your feelings, I clarified. Sometimes keeping distance from certain people is the healthiest choice we can make. She nodded solemnly. Like when I stopped hanging out with Maddie because she was only nice when she wanted help with homework. Something like that, I agreed, marveling at her wisdom. Just on a bigger scale. That night I added a note to Emma's baby book, a tradition I'd maintained since her birth. Today you taught me that you understand boundaries better at 12 than I did at 30. You amaze me every day. Mom, Dad. My acceptance letter came. 17-year-old Emma burst through the front door, waving an envelope emblazoned with the crest of her first-choice university. Her excitement was infectious as she read the scholarship offer aloud, her voice rising with each word. Brian lifted her in a celebratory hug, spinning her around the kitchen. I knew they'd recognize how brilliant you are. I watched them, my heart full. Emma had grown into an extraordinary young woman, compassionate, intelligent, driven. Her college essays had detailed the challenges of being raised by a teenage mother and how it shaped her interest in social work and psychology. The substantial scholarship would cover most of her tuition, with our college fund handling the remainder. My own career had flourished. As vice president of marketing for a national construction firm, I oversaw campaigns across multiple states. The promotion had come with a significant salary increase, allowing us to finally pay off our mortgage and secure Emma's educational future. The legal documents arrived at my office on a Wednesday in March. My assistant placed the envelope on my desk with an apologetic grimace. It was delivered by courier. They required proof of receipt. The return address, Williams and Peters Legal Services, meant nothing to me. I assumed it was related to a contract dispute or perhaps a subcontractor issue. Instead, I found myself named as the defendant in a lawsuit filed by Richard and Barbara Reynolds. Filial support claim, the heading announced in bold type. My hands trembled as I read through the legal jargon. My parents were suing me under a rarely enforced filial responsibility law, claiming I was legally obligated to provide financial support for them in their old age. They cited medical conditions, inability to work, and depletion of retirement funds as grounds for their claim. I called our family attorney, Jonathan Grayson, immediately. I've been served with the strangest lawsuit, I began, my voice unnaturally calm despite the panic churning in my stomach. Jonathan listened as I explained the situation, then sighed heavily. Filial responsibility laws are archaic but still on the books in our state. They're rarely enforced, but technically, adult children can be held financially responsible for indigent parents. Even parents who abandon their child, I asked incredulously. That's where we'll focus our defense, he assured me. Schedule an appointment for tomorrow. Bring any documentation you have of your estrangement. That evening I spread the legal papers across our dining room table as Brian read through them, his expression darkening with each page. They can't be serious, he muttered. After everything they did or didn't do, they expect you to support them now. Jonathan says the laws are vague, but historically, courts have made exceptions for cases involving abandonment or abuse. Good, because this is textbook abandonment, Brian said firmly. I hadn't realized Emma had entered the room until I heard her sharp intake of breath. These are from my biological grandparents, she asked, picking up a document. They're suing you. The color drained from her face as she skimmed the contents. Because you won't give them money after they kicked you out because of me. Emma, this isn't because of you, I said quickly, taking the papers from her trembling hands. This is about their poor financial decisions and their sense of entitlement. But if I hadn't... Stop right there, Brian interrupted. Nothing about this is your fault. Your grandparents made their choices long ago and now they're facing the consequences. We held an impromptu family meeting, explaining the situation as objectively as possible. Emma, now old enough to understand the full story, listened with growing indignation. How can they possibly think they deserve your help, she demanded. You were 17, you needed them, and they threw you away. Her righteous anger on my behalf brought tears to my eyes. The law is complicated, I explained. But Jonathan thinks we have a strong case for exemption. Can I testify? She asked, surprising us both. Tell the judge what it was like growing up, knowing they rejected us. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Brian said, squeezing her shoulder. But your support means everything. The stress of the lawsuit infiltrated every aspect of my life. At work, I found myself distracted during important meetings. At home, I snapped at minor annoyances. My sleep became fragmented with nightmares about courtrooms and homelessness. Jonathan advised gathering evidence of the abandonment journal entries, correspondence, witnesses who could testify to my situation as a pregnant teenager. I unearthed the box of memorabilia from our attic, finding within it the returned letters and photographs I'd sent to my parents over the years. Rebecca, now retired from the diner, immediately offered to testify. I'll tell them exactly what it was, like a pregnant girl working doubles with swollen ankles because her family threw her to the wolves. Miss Patterson, though now battling early-stage Parkinson's, insisted on providing a written affidavit detailing her efforts to help me continue my education after being abandoned. Even Melissa, who had moved to California years earlier, sent emails documenting my brief stay in her parents' basement and my desperate attempts to contact my parents during that time. The collection of evidence painted a stark picture of abandonment, followed by years of rejection. Yet, the anxiety of facing my parents in court, of being judged not just by a legal standard, but by the people who had found me unworthy of love, triggered panic attacks I hadn't experienced since those early days of pregnancy. What if they win? I whispered to Brian one night. What if some legal technicality means I have to support the people who left me destitute? Then we'll handle it, he promised. But Jonathan says the case is weak. Their lawyer is taking a shotgun approach, hoping you'll settle rather than fight. I won't give them a penny, I said, a hardness in my voice I rarely allowed myself. Not after everything they put us through. Emma had taken to researching filial responsibility laws, herself printing articles and case precedents. Did you know most successful claims involve parents who actually raise their children, she reported, highlighting a passage in a legal journal. Courts generally recognize abandonment as an exception. Her determination to help fight the case touched me deeply, though I worried about the toll it was taking on her. The lawsuit had overshadowed her college acceptance, stealing joy from what should have been an exciting time of transition. You should be focusing on graduation and your future, I told her, not legal battles. This is about my future too, she replied, with a maturity that caught me off guard. They're trying to take what you worked so hard to build for us. I won't let them. As the deposition date approached, I found myself standing in front of my closet, deliberating over what to wear to face the people who had shaped so much of my life through their absence. I chose a conservative blue dress, professional but not flashy. Nothing that could be criticized as extravagant or used to portray me as ungrateful. Brian adjusted my collar and kissed my forehead. Remember who you are, he said quietly. Remember what you've overcome. They can't take that from you no matter what happens in that room. With those words echoing in my mind, I walked into the conference room where my parents waited with their lawyer, prepared to defend the life I'd built from the very people who had forced me to build it alone. The law offices of Williams & Peters occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all gleaming glass and polished mahogany. I gripped Brian's hand in the elevator, focusing on steady breathing techniques my therapist had recommended. "They can't hurt you anymore," Brian reminded me. "They have no power over you." Jonathan met us in the reception area, his confidence bolstering my resolve. "We've got this, Ashley. The law may be on the books, but the facts are on our side." The conference room felt airless despite its size. And then there they were, the architects of my teenage nightmare, now elderly but instantly recognizable. Richard Reynolds had shrunk somewhat, his once imposing frame bent slightly at the shoulders. His hair had thinned to wisps of white, but his eyes retained the cold steel I remembered. Barbara sat beside him, hands clasped tightly on the table, her face a map of lines I didn't recognize. She attempted a smile when I entered. I offered no response. Their lawyer, Martin Green, a slick man with expensive cufflinks and an affected drawl, initiated introductions. "Mrs. Anderson, thank you for joining us. I trust we can resolve this family matter amicably." "This isn't a family matter," I corrected, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is a legal dispute between my clients and me." Jonathan nodded approvingly at my distinction. My parents' faces tightened. The deposition began with my parents' narrative, a carefully constructed story of loving parents devastated by their daughter's teenage rebellion. According to them, they had offered support with conditions that I had rejected. They claimed attempts at reconciliation that I had rebuffed and painted themselves as aging, ailing parents abandoned by their only child. "Mrs. Reynolds suffered a minor heart attack last year," Green emphasized. "Mr. Reynolds's arthritis prevents him from continuing his contracting work. Their medical expenses are substantial." "And how is this relevant to my client?" Jonathan interjected. "Given that they have had no relationship for over 2 decades due to their choice to abandon her as a minor." Green shuffled his papers. "The law doesn't specify exemptions for estrangement. Blood relation is the determining factor. The courts have consistently recognized abandonment as grounds for exemption," Jonathan countered. "And we have substantial evidence of abandonment." My turn came to testify. I detailed the night I told them about my pregnancy, the ultimatum being driven to Tyler's house with my belongings. I described my struggles to find housing, complete my education, and provide for my daughter without family support. "Did you reach out to your parents after being asked to leave?" Jonathan asked. "Multiple times. I called daily for weeks. I wrote letters. I sent birth announcements and photos of Emma. Everything was returned unopened or ignored." Green's cross-examination focused on portraying me as ungrateful and vindictive. "Mrs. Anderson, you've done quite well for yourself despite your claims of hardship. Vice President of Marketing, comfortable home in an exclusive neighborhood, European vacation last summer. Yet you refuse to help your elderly parents with basic medical care." "I refuse to financially support people who left me homeless and pregnant at 17, I clarified. "People who never acknowledged their granddaughter's existence. People who only contacted me when they needed money." "So this is about revenge," he pressed. "This is about consequences," I corrected. "My parents made a choice 22 years ago. They chose to stop being parents. They don't get to reclaim that role when it becomes financially convenient." Richard's face darkened. "We gave you everything. The best schools, dance lessons, braces, and you threw it all away for some boy. Then you have the audacity to play victim." Jonathan raised a hand. "Mr. Reynolds, please address your comments through counsel." "She knows what she did," my father continued, ignoring the warning. "Shamed our family, rejected our guidance, then painted us as monsters to anyone who would listen." Richard, Barbara murmured, placing a restraining hand on his arm. His outburst worked in our favor. the mask of concerned elderly parents slipped, revealing the same anger that had driven me from their home 2 decades earlier. The deposition continued with testimony from Rebecca via video conference describing my condition when I arrived at Doreen's diner alone, visibly pregnant, desperate for work. Miss Patterson's affidavit detailed my determination to continue my education despite overwhelming obstacles. As we gathered evidence through discovery, Jonathan uncovered troubling financial irregularities in my parents' claims of destitution. They had transferred property to a cousin shortly before filing the lawsuit. Credit card statements showed purchases at luxury retailers inconsistent with their claimed poverty. They had taken a Caribbean cruise 3 months before, claiming medical expenses prevented them from affording basic necessities. They're hiding assets, Jonathan explained during a strategy meeting, creating an artificial appearance of poverty while maintaining their lifestyle. Can we prove it? Brian asked. The property transfer is documented. The rest requires more digging, but the pattern is clear. They're gaming the system. The court date was set for July 15th, coincidentally the same week as Emma's orientation at university. The timing felt symbolic, the beginning of a new chapter for Emma, overlapping with the final confrontation with my past. Somehow local media got wind of the unusual case. A reporter from the city newspaper contacted me for comment, which I declined. Nevertheless, a small article appeared in the legal section, "Abandoned Teen Mothers Sued by Parents Under Archaic Law." The publicity brought unexpected support. Former classmates reached out with memories of my abrupt disappearance from school and rumors of my parents' explanations. Several offered to testify about Barbara's lies regarding my running away. Emma immersed herself in research, discovering previous filial responsibility cases where abandonment provided exemption. She created a timeline of every attempt I'd made to contact my parents, every returned letter, every ignored milestone. "They can't win, Mom," she insisted, showing me her findings. "The precedent is clear." Despite her confidence, sleep eluded me as the court date approached. I rehearsed my testimony, endlessly terrified of appearing emotional or vindictive. The abandoned teenage girl still lived within me, desperate for approval despite everything. "You've already won," Brian reminded me the night before court. "You built an amazing life without them. You raised an incredible daughter. Nothing that happens tomorrow changes that." His words sustained me as I donned my most professional suit, applied subtle makeup to hide my exhaustion, and prepared to face the people who had cast me out of their lives when I needed them. Most parents who had become strangers now, adversaries, seeking to claim what I'd built from the ashes of their rejection. Courtroom B of the county courthouse smelled of furniture, polish, and aged paper. Morning sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting dramatic shadows across the judge's bench. Judge Eleanor Whitman, a 60-something woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, reviewed documents as we filed in. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, my father in a suit that hung loosely on his frame, my mother in a conservative dress that emphasized her fragility. They had perfected their appearance as vulnerable elderly parents, though I noticed my father had no difficulty walking despite claims of debilitating arthritis. Emma and Brian sat directly behind me, their presence a tangible reminder of everything I was fighting to protect. Rebecca had flown in from Arizona, where she'd retired, and sat beside them. Even Doreen had closed the diner for the morning to attend. "All rise," the bailiff announced, as Judge Whitman officially began proceedings. Martin Green presented my parents' case, first painting a heart-wrenching picture of elderly parents abandoned by their successful daughter during their time of need. "Richard and Barbara Reynolds gave everything to their only child," he concluded. "They paid for her education, her extracurricular activities, her medical care. When they find themselves in need, filial responsibility laws clearly indicate their daughter's obligation to reciprocate that care." Jonathan rose, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, While filial responsibility laws do exist in our state, they have never been enforced in cases where parents abandon their minor child. The Reynolds did not give everything to their daughter. In fact, they gave her nothing when she needed them most. He detailed my abrupt ejection from the family home at 17, the returned letters and photographs, the years of rejection. Rebecca testified about finding me working double shifts while 7 months pregnant. Miss Patterson's affidavit described my determination to complete my education despite homelessness. When my turn came to testify, I approached the witness stand with measured steps. After being sworn in, I met Judge Whitman's evaluating gaze directly. Mrs. Sanderson, please tell the court about the circumstances under which you left your parents' home, Jonathan prompted. I recounted that terrible day in precise detail. My father's rage, my mother's silent complicity, the ultimatum, the drive to Tyler's house, the suitcases deposited on the sidewalk. What efforts did you make to maintain contact with your parents after leaving their home? Jonathan continued. I called daily for the first month. When they blocked my number, I wrote letters. I sent birth announcements when Emma was born. I mailed photos on her birthday every year until she was 5. Everything was returned unopened or ignored. Green's cross-examination attempted to undermine my testimony. Mrs. Anderson, isn't it true that your parents offered to help if you terminated your pregnancy? They offered to let me continue living in their home if I had an abortion, I corrected. That wasn't help, that was coercion. And you made no attempt to comply with their reasonable expectations as parents. There is nothing reasonable about demanding your child choose between her home and her baby, I replied steadily. Green changed tactics. You've done quite well for yourself. Vice President of Marketing home in an exclusive neighborhood. Yet you refuse to assist your elderly parents with basic medical needs. I've done well because I worked 3 jobs while earning my degree. I succeeded despite their abandonment, not because of their support. And according to their recent credit card statements, their basic medical needs include a Caribbean cruise and a new car. Green's eyebrows shot up at this revelation. Jonathan had saved this piece of evidence for maximum impact. We have documentation, Jonathan interjected, approaching the bench with financial records. The plaintiffs transferred their home to a cousin 3 months before filing this lawsuit. Their credit card statements show purchases at luxury retailers inconsistent with claims of financial distress. Judge Whitman reviewed the documents, her expression growing increasingly severe. My father was called to testify next. Under Jonathan's cross-examination, his carefully constructed facade began to crack. Mr. Reynolds, you claimed your daughter ran away. Yet you've just heard testimony that you drove her to her boyfriend's house with her belongings. Which version is true? My father shifted uncomfortably. She gave us no choice. She refused to follow our rules. Your rules being that she terminate her pregnancy or leave your home. We couldn't support her poor decisions, he insisted. So you acknowledge. You gave your minor daughter an ultimatum that resulted in her homelessness. She had options, my father snapped, his composure slipping. She chose to keep that baby instead of her future. That was her decision, not ours. Her future seems quite successful despite your abandonment, Jonathan observed. She got lucky, my father retorted. Most teenage mothers end up on welfare. We tried to prevent that by making her homeless. How exactly did that help prevent hardship? My father's face reddened. We taught her consequences. Obviously, she learned the lesson. The courtroom fell silent at this admission. Judge Whitman's pen paused mid-note. My mother's testimony proved equally damaging. Under gentle questioning from Jonathan, she admitted returning Emma's birth announcements unopened and ignoring my graduation notices. When asked about her recent attempt at reconciliation, she faltered. I missed my daughter, she claimed tearfully. Yet phone records show you contacted her only after your husband's business failed, Jonathan pointed out. And you misrepresented your marital status, claiming to have left Miss Reynolds when you were still living together. By the time closing arguments concluded, the mood in the courtroom had shifted palpably. Judge Whitman removed her glasses, addressing us directly. Filial responsibility laws were designed to prevent elderly parents who raised their children from becoming wards of the state. They were not created to force adults to support parents who abandoned them during childhood. She continued, her tone measured but firm. The evidence clearly demonstrates that the plaintiffs ejected their minor daughter from their home, resulting in her homelessness during pregnancy. They subsequently rejected all attempts at communication for over 2 decades. Furthermore, their claims of financial distress appear deliberately manufactured for this litigation. She closed the file before her with finality. The court finds in favor of the defendant. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Additionally, the plaintiffs will be responsible for the defendant's legal fees given the frivolous nature of this lawsuit. My father half rose from his chair, face contorted with indignation, but Green placed a restraining hand on his arm. My mother simply stared ahead, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. As we gathered our belongings, my parents moved toward the exit. In the crowded vestibule, inevitable confrontation occurred. "You've always been selfish," my father hissed, blocking our path. "Even now you can't show basic Christian charity toward your own parents." For 22 years I had imagined this moment facing my parents as an equal, not a terrified teenager. I had rehearsed cutting remarks and righteous accusations, but standing before them now I felt nothing but a profound weariness and surprisingly pity. "I forgive you," I said quietly. My father blinked in confusion. "Not for your sake," I clarified. "For mine. I forgive you so I can finally be free of you. I forgive you so your cruelty stops taking up space in my life." But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or financing your retirement. It just means I'm no longer carrying the weight of your rejection. I turned to my mother, whose expression wavered between hope and fear. "Emma graduates next month. She's valedictorian, heading to university on a scholarship. You'll never know her. That's your loss, not hers." Taking Brian's hand on one side and Emma's on the other, I walked past them without a backward glance. That evening we celebrated at Doreen's Diner, now managed by Rebecca's oldest daughter. The booth where I'd once served customers while massively pregnant now hosted a victory dinner with my chosen family: Brian, Emma, Rebecca, and Miss Patterson. Her tremor more pronounced, but her smile as encouraging as ever. "To Ashley," Brian toasted, raising his glass. "The strongest person I know." "To family," Emma amended. "The real kind, the ones who stay." Later that night, Emma and I sat on the porch swing watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said, leaning against my shoulder. "Not just for today, but for everything. For doing the hard thing instead of the easy thing every single time." "I did what any mother would do," I demurred. "No," she insisted. "Not any mother. Not their kind of parent. You broke the cycle." 3 weeks later, Emma graduated as valedictorian of her class. From the audience, I watched my daughter in her cap and gown, addressing her classmates with poise and wisdom. She spoke about resilience, about how challenges shape character, about the family we choose versus the family we're born into. "My mother taught me that our circumstances don't define us," she concluded. "Our responses to them do. She showed me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a daily choice, a constant commitment." Because of her, I understand that family isn't about DNA. It's about who stands beside you when everyone else walks away. As applause erupted around us, Brian squeezed my hand. "She's extraordinary," he whispered, "just like her mother." In that moment, surrounded by genuine love and witnessing my daughter's triumph, I realized the lawsuit had given me an unexpected gift: complete freedom from the past. The court's validation of my experience had severed the last tenuous thread connecting me to my parents. The abandoned teenager had finally found justice, and the successful woman I'd become could now move forward unburdened. What would you do if your parents abandoned you, then sued you years later? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family trauma. Remember that true family is built on love and loyalty, not just blood. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings strength to anyone facing their own family battles.